Good morning. Let's pray first. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this beautiful Sabbath day and that we can be here together this morning. Please come into this place and fill us with your Spirit and be with me as I speak. Please let these be your words and not mine. In Jesus' name, amen. Sorry, I'm coming down with a cold, so my voice might be a little funny sometimes. So, this past July, my mom and I spent 10 days at Weimar for the Neil Nedley Depression Recovery Program. And we were there because, as some of you may know, I have OCD, and obsessive compulsive disorder, that I've struggled with for years. And OCD is pretty common. It affects about 200,000 people in the United States. And it has a lot of different, manifestations. It affects everybody a little differently. But the basic problem is that your brain gets stuck in a pathway and it circles and can't move on. So that's kind of the basic idea. And so like when I was little, I went through the classic symptoms of like washing my hands obsessively, that's a common one, and other like external fears, and it almost always involves fear. And but then as I got older, it settled into my thoughts. And I'd learned to force myself to do stuff I was afraid of. Like, if I was afraid of a dog, I'd force myself to go pet it. And so I learned to handle it when it was external, but I found it a lot harder to fight when it was in the way I think. And it's been kind of like a roller coaster. Most of the time I'm fine, and a lot of people never know. But then, especially when I'm tired or under stress, it gets me, and I just can't break the thought pattern of fear. So sometimes I've actually sunk into major depression during these times, even though I didn't know that's what it was then. So we've tried various therapies and things to help with it, but they would help temporarily, like with a certain issue, but then the OCD changes and targets something else, and then I would just fall under it again. And but this past February, my dad went to the EQ Summit in Texas, Dr. Nedley's EQ Summit. And while he was there, he learned more about the Depression Recovery Program, and he decided that I needed to go to that. And my parents thought we should try it. And I'll admit, I was afraid to go. It wasn't that I didn't want help, because I really, really wanted help. But I guess I was afraid of what people would think, because part of me just wanted to pretend I was a fine, normal kid, hope nobody would ever find out what I really felt like. And I was afraid that if they did find out, everybody would be like disgusted and not want anything to do with me or something. But the biggest problem was I was afraid it wasn't going to work. And I really wanted it to, but I was afraid to get my hopes up. In the end, though, we were on our way. Well, the other thing I'd been afraid of was that I'd be the only young person there, and everybody would think there was something wrong with me or something. But then we went there, even though I was afraid. And as soon as I got there, all my fears started to disintegrate, because there was at least half of the participants were young people, and one girl was only a year older than me. And besides that, they were all normal people. And they seemed even better than normal, actually. All the participants and staff were some of the nicest people I've ever met. It was amazing. So the program started, and at first they focused on strengthening our frontal lobes through hydrotherapy, and it was not the gentle warming and cooling thing. The hot tub was like 107, and the cold water had ice cubes floating in it. They had this huge ice freezer next to the tub, and they would get this big bucket and dump it in while you're sitting in there. It was pretty bad. But it was good. We were okay. Nobody died or anything. And then they had us exercising 3 hours a day. And that was really fun, because Weimar is in the foothills of the Sierras, and they have over 10 miles of beautiful hiking trails. So that was really, really fun. But they made us do it in like the middle of the day, and it was over 100 degrees stuff. So that was kind of bad sometimes. But that was also, we learned to discipline ourselves to do things that weren't always pleasant. So then they had us do music therapy while working on 1,000-piece puzzles, plant-based vegan diet rich in omega-3s and other important nutrients for the brain, bright light therapy, regular schedule, massage, restating negative thoughts in a positive context, keeping a gratitude journal, and other lifestyle stuff like that. So that was to strengthen our frontal lobes so that they could teach us the stuff they needed to teach us. So then also Don McIntosh did morning and evening worships every day, and Dr. Nedley would give a lecture every morning, and then we'd have other lectures later in the day sometimes. And we had, we had individual counseling sessions with Don and Kristen Henley, who was a therapist, and we had one-on-one appointments with Dr. Nedley. And a lot of the stuff we were learning I'd heard before, like the lifestyle stuff, quite a bit of it I was already doing, but because my dad's been to these programs and stuff. But as it all came together in one package and it all was tied in, so something clicked, and I made some earth-shaking discoveries. At least they were earth-shaking for me. And I want to share some of them with you. But before I do, I have a disclaimer. Please don't think that I have it all figured out. I have had ups and downs even since we called it DR, so that's what I'm going to call it the rest of the time, depression recovery. And I didn't want to do this sermon because I know I'm not perfect, and I was engaging in the cognitive distortion that you have to be perfect to be up here. And but I'm just so excited about these tools that have helped me so much that I want to share them. So I think you'll appreciate them too. First, how many of you have read the book Telling Yourself the Truth? Okay, I think our church should order enough for everybody to share with your friends too, because it literally changed my life. It's an amazing book. And so as I was reading that book there and listening to Dr. Nedley and Don talk about cognitive distortions, I realized that I had a lot of distorted thoughts. And I as they describe these, I recognize them. All or nothing thinking, that's an example of that would be like, if I can't do it perfect, I better not even start at all. And that I'm a perfectionist, so that was a big thing for me. Discounting the positive, fortune teller error, and that includes worrying about the future and fearing the worst all the time. Magnification, minimization, and Dr. Nedley described this as majoring in minors and minoring in majors. It's a classic OCD symptom, and it means worrying about insignificant things while failing to see the big picture. Emotional reasoning, mislabeling, and personalization. And you can find aspects of each of those. I think most of us would recognize quite a few of those in our thoughts in different forms. And these distortions are actually common to the entire population, not just depression and anxiety patients. But as they introduced us to these enemies that we maybe hadn't recognized before, they also taught us how to confront them using cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT is what we call it. So the first step in CBT is taking responsibility for your own emotions. And let's see. I didn't write this very well. It's all in one place, so I can't find where I'm at. Okay, so A to C thinking is when you think that something, it could be your circumstances, a person or an event or any situation causes your feelings and your reaction to that. And so we recognize the A, the activating event, but then we link it straight to C, the consequence. But when really what's happening is an ABC situation. There's still an activating event, it's the same event, but what actually causes our feelings and emotions and reaction to that event is not it, but our beliefs about it, which is the B. And here's an example that Kristen used when she was telling us about this. The A, or activating event, is that you're criticized by your boss. But that by itself can't do anything to you. What makes you miserable is when you tell yourself, he has no right to talk to me this way, and I can't stand it. I can't stand it is when you hear yourself saying that, that's a light bulb that something's wrong here. So the more rational approach is to say, I don't like the way he's talking to me, but I can stand it. And when you say that, rather than anxiety, anger, and depression, you'll only get a mild annoyance, lack of significant emotional distress. That's what the slide said. So when we take responsibility for our emotions and reactions, then we're prepared to successfully dispute all of our cognitive distortions. So as I began to recognize how these distortions were cropping up in my own thoughts, I began to see the lies that I was telling myself for what they are. They're lies. And the thing is, I also sort of realized that I usually sort of know the truth, but I didn't know how to believe it. I felt completely enslaved by my distorted thoughts. And I really didn't even know that it was possible to be free. But using these principles that I was learning, I started to understand the thrilling prospect that I am in charge of my thoughts. I don't have to be a slave to my misbeliefs. I don't have to let OCD or my emotions control me. I can take the upper hand and refuse to let my midbrain lead me around. Fear, anxiety, and other similar emotions come from the midbrain, and so does OCD. But I can choose to think with my frontal lobe, not my midbrain. They told us this little saying, it's okay to feel with your heart, but thinking with your heart can lead to trouble. And so the key is the mind can change the brain. When you choose to think with your brain, think with your mind, you can override the fear responses that come up. And this was a huge, huge light bulb moment for me. It gives a whole new meaning to faith. It's an action of the will. And through it, that's how we access the power that God promises us in John 1:12. It says, but as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. That's choosing, making a choice to tell yourself the truth. And the result is described in this verse that Dr. Natalie quoted often. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So I found that it is possible to be free. So nothing we learned there suggested that avoiding life's problems and stressful situations was the way to be peaceful and happy. Dr. Natalie showed us a graph that represented work stress related to performance, and it's actually a bell-shaped curve, so kind of like that. And so the highest performance is in the area of moderate stress. And he repeatedly emphasized the importance of manual labor, doing something useful, and but even more importantly, he reminded us that while we were there to focus on our own recovery, in order to improve and flourish, our focus needed to be on others. He shared this quote from My Life Today, page 70. It says, God's abounding love and presence in the heart will give the power of self-control and will mold and fashion the mind and character. And the key to self-control is self-sacrifice. This quote is from page 173 of My Life Today again. It says, little attentions, small acts of love and self-sacrifice constitute no small share of the blessings and happiness of life. And similarly, none of the CBT principles that they were teaching us implied that telling yourself the truth meant ignoring emotional or physical pain. or stuffing your feelings in and pretending just everything was fine and dandy when it really wasn't. They emphasize the importance of recognizing the difference between I don't like it and I can't stand it. So I don't like it is true, but I can't stand it, well, the only thing a human really can't stand is death. So most of us haven't experienced that yet. Any of us, actually. So a quote from Telling Yourself the Truth explains this idea really well, so I'm going to read it. We're speaking the truth, not making stupid remarks about not having the emotions we were born with. When you cut your finger, you say, ouch, right? When your heart hurts, it's truthful to say, I hurt. But you don't end the self-talk at that. Here's where so many counselors lock up shop. They advise, admit the hurt, then wave goodbye. But what do you do next? You continue the truth-telling about the hurt. Here's some more truth to replace the lies that create anguish and leave it raw. It's true I'm feeling bad. It's only unpleasant, however. It's not Doomsville. It's not Doomsville because I'm not letting it be. That's the key. You don't have to let it be a disaster. It says, I will allow some good, healthy pain, but I won't allow anguish, misery, woe, and disaster. I'm in control here. God has created me as an emotional being, and so I can expect to have emotions. But God has also given me the fruit of the Spirit, self-control. So I will control my feelings, and they can't control me. Optimism is also an unrealistic and ineffective way of looking at life. There was a study of 224 people, and in the study, pessimism predicted, let's see, what else did it predict? Anxiety and other negative results, but optimism predicted nothing, not improvement or better coping ability as you might expect. Dr. Nedley shared this quote repeatedly. It says, optimism means expecting the best, but confidence means knowing how to handle the worst. Never make a move if you are purely optimistic. So as we all learned, we were all doing this together, and as we all were learning about these, how to correct our cognitive distortions, we had a lot of fun correcting each other throughout the day. Somebody would, like, sitting at the lunch table, we'd be telling a story or something. Be like, that was just horrible, or it was awful. I couldn't stand it. And we'd be like, hey, you're awfulizing. So we had a lot of fun with it. But the amazing freedom that we were each finding in doing this with the more important issues in our thoughts was not something to joke about. It was amazing. And like I said before, I sort of talked about the group a little bit, but this group of people was incredible. There was 20 of us from as many different backgrounds as you can think of. We had quite a few of us were Adventist, but we also had a Baptist, a Catholic, and we even had an agnostic. But the unity that we experienced was amazing. We understood each other on a deep level, and we were willing to be open with each other because nobody was judgmental of anybody else. Nobody thought they were better than anybody else. We were all just there to support each other in any way we could. And I thought it was a really good example of what our church is supposed to be like. And I think it's what heaven's going to be like too, only it'll be even better because there won't be the depression part. And it's really hard to put 10 days in which every aspect of our lives was addressed and put it into, well, it's going to be a little more than 20 minutes, I'm afraid, sorry, but into a sermon time. But I don't have the time to cover everything that we learned. So I've chosen to focus mostly on the part that deals with thoughts because that's what I needed the most. But all of it is important. You can't just take your favorite part and just do that. But the amazing thing is that it's our 8 laws of health. It's our Adventist health message. And it was really neat to see how science was backing up what our church has known for years. And when it's all put together and no aspect is neglected, the results are phenomenal. In our group, we had a 100% improvement in depression over just 10 days. That meant every single person there went down a whole, there was either none, mild, moderate, or severe. and every single person went down at least one whole step. And quite a few people came with severe depression, left with none. And then we even had a person who actually scored as emotionally retarded on the EQ test that you take when you first get there. But by the end of the program, they were like second highest in the whole group, which was far above average. And so depression was never part of God's plan. And through the principles of health outlined in the Bible and further explained by Ellen White, he has given us the power and the tools to overcome it. I mentioned earlier that a classic cognitive distortion is majoring in minors and minoring in majors. And this is one that I have dealt with a lot. And at my last appointment with Dr. Nedley, he prayed at the end like usual. And I'll never forget that prayer. It gave me more courage than all the lectures and sermons that I'd heard. He mentioned that OCD tends to major in minors and tends to leave out the majors. But he prayed that I would be able to see the big picture. And that for me sums up everything that I learned there. It's all about perspective. Looking at life in view of the great controversy and the real issues at stake, and living in view of the cross and the matchless love of Jesus makes the insignificant or even imaginary concerns that become so blown up in our narrow fields of vision shrink down to their proper proportions. It takes a conscious choice to think this way because it goes against feeling. However, we do not have to depend on our own strength. Dawn shared how some recent research has shown that while willpower normally decreases during the day because use depletes it, Christians who tap into spiritual power have an endless source of willpower that the researchers, being agnostics, acknowledged but cannot explain. John 1:12, again, I keep coming back to this, says, "To as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name." One day after I left, I was reading 2 Samuel 22, and by the way, that chapter is almost exactly the same as Psalm 18. It's almost word for word, so you can read both of them. And at DR, Dawn and Dr. Nedley both would often take Bible stories and put them into the context of depression recovery. And they would bring out the CBT principles that were in the story and talk about them. It was really cool. And so I was kind of doing the same thing as I was reading. And I'd encourage you to try this because all the answers to our problems are in the Bible. And all we have to do is look for them. Sometimes it takes looking from a little different angle or digging a little deeper, but it's all there. And that's why God recorded the mistakes and the imperfections of the Bible characters so that we could see that they had the same problems we did and we can see how to handle them. So anyway, as I was doing this with 2 Samuel 22, I was really surprised suddenly to find my testimony written in the Bible. So go ahead and turn there with me. 2 Samuel 22. Okay, so there's sort of an introduction, and then after that, David describes the frightful situation that he was in. It says, "When the waves of death compassed me, the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. The snares of death prevented me." Now, obviously, this is a bit more extreme than what I was dealing with. Still, my thoughts and my faulty brain chemistry were my enemies, and they scared me to death. So I was afraid. It says then, "In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried to my God." And even though I couldn't necessarily see that he was answering, it says, "He did hear my voice out of his temple, and my cry did enter into his ears." And then the response is amazing. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but go ahead when you're at home, read about what God does. And So at the cry of his child, God bows the heavens, flies on the wings of the wind, sends out thunder and lightning, and shakes the whole earth, basically. Verse 10 says, he bowed the heavens also and came down. The whole section around that verse is describing very dramatically how high and powerful God is. But when his child was in distress, he came down. From that high place, he came down just to save his child. So, in going on, it says, and the channels of the sea appeared. The foundations of the world were discovered at the rebuking of the Lord, at the blast of the breath of his nostrils. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy and from them that hated me, for they were too strong for me. Like nothing else, my struggles have showed me my weakness. I'm no match for the enemy. When I try to muddle around and straighten my crooked thoughts on my own, I find that I just can't. It's too strong for me. But his strength is made perfect in our weakness. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me. I looked up this in Strong's. It says, a large place, as it's used here, is a safe place. And so in my little analogy, he brought me to DR. That was a safe place where I could learn how to handle my crooked thoughts. So later on, David continues, for thou art my lamp, O Lord, and the Lord will lighten my darkness. Dark places are scary when we try to go there by ourselves. At home, even though I'm technically supposed to be like a big girl, I get scared when I go down to feed the horses by myself in the dark, because it's scary. But when somebody's with me, even like Temezian, who's a lot smaller than me, even just having somebody with me, I'm fine. So as I travel through life, there's going to be dark places. But if I'm following God, he will be there, and he will lighten those places. For by thee I have run through a troop. By my God have I leaped over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. One of the hallmark symptoms of depression is feelings of deep sadness and feelings of emptiness. And I looked up this word perfect. It means entire, complete, full. God's way, which is a course of life, is full and complete. It's the exact opposite of depression. And then in verse 33 it says, and he maketh my way perfect. He teacheth my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. At DR he gave me the tools to stand up and refuse to be a victim of distorted thoughts. I have pursued mine enemies and destroyed them, and turned not again until I had consumed them. So we can't afford to let a single cognitive distortion remain alive, because it will grow and it'll keep controlling us if we don't tell the truth to ourselves in every situation. And he has girded me with strength to battle, so I can do it. As I said before, nothing in my life has showed me more clearly than this, how utterly helpless I am on my own. So many times I've been at the end of my rope. There was absolutely nothing I could do. But as I have experienced, God saved me from those places where nothing else could. He has, through this trial, given me the most undeniable evidence that I could ask for of his reality, his power, and his intimate involvement in human lives. As I see how he's led me every step of the way, I know that the Lord liveth, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of the rock of my salvation. So as the 10 days drew to a close, quite a few of us had misgivings about leaving. We were doing so well there, and we had so much support, and we were afraid of what would happen when we were on our own. And in closing, I want to read a poem to you that Dr. Nedley shared with us in one of his lectures. It really encouraged me. Sometimes life seems hard to bear, full of sorrow, trouble, and woe. It's then I have to remember that it's in the valleys I grow. If I always stayed on the mountaintop and never experienced pain, I would never appreciate God's love and would be living in vain. I have so much to learn, and my growth is very slow. Sometimes I need the mountaintops, but it's in the valley I grow. I do not always understand why things happen as they do, but I'm very sure of one thing: my Lord will see me through. My little valleys are nothing when I picture Christ on the cross. He went through the valley of death. His victory was Satan's loss. Forgive me, Lord, for complaining when I'm feeling so very low. Just give me a gentle reminder that it's in the valleys I grow. Continue to strengthen me, Lord, and use my life each day to share your love with others and help them find their way. Thank you for valleys, Lord, for this one thing I know: the mountaintops are glorious, but it's in the valley I grow. As I left DR, I knew that there would be valleys ahead, and there have been. But I wrote this in my journal right before we left. It says, I know Jesus has been with me all along. He has carried me through rough, dark places. This is one of the mountaintop times, but I know he will keep carrying me through the valleys ahead. And I have learned so much here that will help me the rest of my life. I can be free. So, you don't have to have depression or OCD or anything wrong in order to be helped by these principles. They help everybody. And so I just want to challenge you to tell yourself the truth. And I want to close by singing our closing hymn. And this is a song that we sang at DR that was really encouraging to me. It's, what does the bulletin say? Is it 74? 74, yeah. Like a River Glorious.